Hello everyone and welcome. Today, we're diving into the fascinating world of ethology and behavioral science. Get ready to explore a concept that shook the scientific community in the mid-20th century, the mysterious behavioral sink and the groundbreaking experiments conducted by ethologist John Calhoun. If you've ever wondered about the impact of overpopulation on behavior, you're in for a treat. But before we dive in, if you're excited to learn something new, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, ring the notification bell, and give us a thumbs up. Alright, let's get started.
2.5 years ago, we found Dr. John Calhoun knee-deep in mice in the mouse heaven he designed for the National Institute of Mental Health Animal Center near Washington. Dr. Calhoun wanted to find out what would happen to a mouse colony given everything mice need except living space. The result was chilling. 2.5 years ago, more than 2,000 mice were packed into Mouse City. Today, a tiny handful of survivors huddles in one corner of the city.
John Bumpass Calhoun was an American ethologist and behavioral researcher, noted for his studies of population density and its effects on behavior. He coined the term behavioral sink in the mid-20th century, gaining prominence through his experiments with rodents, particularly Norway rats and mice. His research delved into the impact of overpopulation on behavior, specifically examining social dynamics in crowded environments. In these studies, Calhoun set up controlled environments labeled as rat utopias, or mouse paradises, with restricted space and resources that enabled rodent populations to multiply rapidly. With the escalating population density, he noted a range of abnormal behaviors among the rodents, such as heightened aggression, disrupted social hierarchies, territorial conflicts, and a decline in reproductive success. These factors resulted in social breakdowns and, in certain instances, a decrease in population. This collection of behaviors came to be recognized as the behavioral sink. The term describes the phenomenon of rats voluntarily clustering together, likely stemming from previous instances of involuntary crowding during feeding. Calhoun attempted to alleviate the consequences by adjusting settings, but he encountered challenges in addressing the overall pathological outcomes of overcrowding.
Dr. Calhoun explains what the overcrowding did to Mouse City's inhabitants.
The last 1,000 animals born never learned to develop the social behaviors. They never learned to be aggressive, which is necessary in defense of home sites. They never learned to court. There was no mating. Being no mating, there were no progeny, and the older animals, whose behavior was already becoming disrupted, they eventually reached an age too old to reproduce, and so it was all left up to these last 1,000 or so, whom we call the beautiful ones, because not engaging in any stressful activity and only paying attention to themselves, they groomed themselves well, so they looked very fine specimens. But from that point on, which was about the time that you were here 2.5 years ago, this reproduction totally ceased, and the animals have just aged and died.
In a particularly noteworthy experiment known as Universe 25, mice were supplied with ample resources, causing the population to peak at 2,000. However, this abundance eventually led to abnormal and destructive behaviors, ultimately resulting in extinction.
That you started this experiment with just a few mice some 20 months ago. Apparently, you've been able to dissect some. Have you noticed any changes in tissue?
Well, the major thing...
The stress.
Well, certain classes of these, for instance, comparing these males on the floor here who are withdrawn, they are highly stressed animals, but the stress comes from each other because of this peculiar violence that they exhibit, which leaves them as this animal with his tail all chewed up, but they do it to each other. these are highly stressed individuals. On the other hand, the beautiful one, which I just showed you, are very extremely unstressed, and we've run the Dr. Julius Axelrod has run the assay of the enzyme which converts noradrenaline to adrenaline as the basis for this. On the other hand, we've been removing females from other populations just terminated and looking at their uteri, and for animals up to a year of age who've come up in the latter history of the colonies, there's essentially no evidence of conceiving. So there's, at this stage, this is part of the overliving phenomenon. And it's these individuals who are not conceiving are the ones which are not stressed. They're the beautiful ones who lack involvement. So that's the essential story of what's going on in our studies.
Calhoun's research emerged as a significant animal model for understanding societal collapse, leaving a lasting impact on urban sociology and psychology.
Have you been surprised, Doctor, about the results of this, what you've learned so far? Some 20 months ago, did you think all these things were going to happen?
Well, I had a slightly different hypothesis which held true only in the early stages, and this was that the larger the space, the smaller the ultimate population density. That's proved not to be true, but a second aspect of that hypothesis was that the larger the space with reference to the number of colonizers, the slower it would get started. And this has been true because the essential analogy here is that when there are few animals, as in this particular universe, a male, any mouse when he was out would rarely meet another. And therefore, he identified with all of his physical environment. Mm-hmm. So his own ego boundaries extended out to include all of these things, which he was committed to. And therefore, any other animal coming out and moving towards any portion of that would elicit anxiety and therefore aggression. And we have huge territories, and this is an essential formulation of territoriality. So that in the larger the space, the more likely animals develop territoriality and the more extreme. And this did inhibit initial reproductive rate.
Calhoun's work was anthropomorphically framed, making it accessible to a broader audience. He suggested that the fate of the rodent population could serve as a metaphor for potential human consequences, describing the social breakdown as a spiritual death with reference to bodily death, known as the second death mentioned in one of the biblical verses from Revelation.
Perhaps the most chilling conclusion from his Mouse City studies, says Dr. Calhoun, is that once this change in social behavior occurs, it apparently cannot be reversed.
It's this fact of apparent irreversible phase shifts that gives some of us a particular concern over the fate of the human situation, because we see worldwide the breaking down of social roles, the increase in contact as a result of the breakdown of social roles and because there are too many people, that this might lead to an overriding of our controls, of our total culture, and would be set into a process which would either fix us rigidly forever into some sort of global tribalism without any adaptation to change, or that would result perhaps eventually some decline, very much like we've seen here, but that postponed somewhat.
Dr. John B. Calhoun, with a very sobering look at a possible future for us.
The concept of the behavioral sink has been extended to discussions about potential social and psychological consequences of overpopulation and urban crowding in human societies. However, it's crucial to recognize that the applicability of Calhoun's findings to human populations remains a topic of debate, and the term behavioral sink is primarily associated with the specific conditions of his rodent experiments. His concerns primarily focused on the early stages of human population surge and urbanization, cautioning against potential societal sterility. Today, his predictions may find relevance in discussions about declining fertility rates, aging populations and societal changes as observed globally. Additionally, parallels have been drawn between Calhoun's experiments and declining sexual interest and activity, particularly influenced by socioeconomic status and gender.
Dr. Calhoun, as a human being, after going through this experiment, what goes through your mind? Are you worried about the future of mankind?
A pathological situation like this gives us an understanding of what may be going on in the human situation, or what might go on and be catastrophic. And what is really catastrophic and where the real fear is on a level where the mice and man are extremely similar. That is, the mice have programs. They're like little computers. And this is basically genetic, with a much smaller element of learned behavior. And too high contact rate disorganizes the program so that it gets washed out. So it's disconnected, or it doesn't express itself. This is where you get the lack of involvement. On the human level, we do have a much more complex brain. It does get programmed, less by genetics, less by heredity than for the mice, much more cultural. But it's just as subject to being disorganized, to having a program disorganized through inappropriate sequences of contacts, too many contacts. And so that we have this danger, and part of the danger is that we don't have an adequate establishment, we're now seeing, because the quote establishment doesn't provide all appropriate channels, we should destroy the establishment. We need a better establishment to allow interrelationships to protect us from too many contacts, but to allow us for those contacts which we do engage in to be more meaningful for our own lives and for meaningful to others in a compassionate sense of each of us being involved in helping the other to fulfill his roles. We'll have many more roles, and this is where the notion of compassion comes in, is helping each of us, helping others to fulfill their programs for development. And so we're at this peculiar stage where you're highly optimistic, at the same time highly pessimistic, and you wish to throw your weight, intellectual weight, to moving towards the optimistic side, to opening up continuing evolution.
Thank you for watching. Feel free to share your thoughts, insights, and any questions you may have. Your engagement makes this journey truly meaningful. Until our next encounter, continue exploring, keep learning, and stay curious.